Hello guys and welcome back on the channel. There we go. I know that you've been waiting for such video for all these years. You won't be able to find anything like this online, over the YouTube or whatever. I'm about to show you the main lines, absolutely all the main and the most important lines in the dragon. Of course, it's for black. I believe that it's equally important to go and to find the first part of the video step by step by black, how to play against the sidelines against the dragon, so you can play successfully even these ones. Why side? Because usually people are, like bored with all those side approaches by black. But if you really want to go for something that everybody enjoys, then you should learn the lines from the following video. Here I'm going to show you the current position on the board. You know how it actually appears on the board, and I'm going to show you three moves: g4, and equally important and often in practice, bishop c4, so-called Yugoslav variation, and long castle, which is absolutely the most popular from my experience in the last couple of years. It's called Rouser line. Let's get started, and this is gonna be a long video. So let's go. After e4, c5, knight f3, d6, it's a typical approach to get the dragon. So we have the dragon position. Of course, absolutely the most popular continuation and something that almost everybody goes for is bishop e3, f3. Please don't forget about this position. Don't ever go with the knight g4. That's a very important deviation here that you have to remember, because if you go with the knight g4, you lose on the spot. They have this bishop b5 check, because one might think that knight g4 could win the dark square bishop, which could be one of the crucial pieces, but you actually lose on the spot. If you play bishop d7, queen takes g4, and you lose knight on g4. That's the thing. Or in case of knight c6, you just lose the knight c6 and you just lose exchange in the worst case scenario. Actually, best case scenario. So after bishop e3, you just have to go with bishop g7, f3, you go short castle, queen d2, and knight c6. So once again, we have the tabia position, and here white has three options. They have a line, ninth move g4, which I can, see in the practice from time to time. It's a pretty interesting approach by white to play g4. It's not bad at all for them to go with this move, and it's called, I believe, pen of variation against the dragon. So early g4 has the idea to go with an early h4 and h5 without committing themselves with both bishop c4, which is typical for the Yugoslavian variation, and long castle. So that should actually tell you something else about the g4, because if you treat this g4 variation in its classic sense, like it's a long castle ninth move or bishop c4 Yugoslav variation, you're gonna easily lose the game. What does it mean? If you play like it's the Yugoslav line and you play bishop d7, they won't commit themselves with both bishop c4 and long castle, which means that they save two tempi to attack you on the king side. So they go h4, so they go h5, and when you think everything is cool and everything should be the way it is, it's not gonna be like that. They're just going to play in this position. Even a long castle is possible, but they don't have to play long castle because after knight a5 they have knight b3, but they can also take on g6, and after f takes g6 they now can go with a long castle, and after queen a5 they can go with something like king to b1. In all these positions, according to modern theory, what is much better? If you treat it like they play the Rouser line with a long castle and you take on d4 and play bishop e6, waiting for them to make long castle, they won't do it. They will play h4, they will play h5, and they will play a3. They haven't committed a long castle, or actually queenside castle, and now they have a very easy kingside attack. They saved a couple of tempi, and of course, in this situation, black is going to be under severe problems. So just like you see that g4 variation we have to treat in a certain fashion. Main line will be bishop e6, but I won't show you bishop e6. I'm going to insist first here on bishop g4. When I was younger, this piece sack was considered to be very interesting for black, and I even won a couple of games when I was, I don't know, around 16 or 17, and I just enjoyed these dragon positions. Nowadays, bishop g4 is considered to be pretty dangerous for playing with black, but it's okay. I mean, you can play it, for example, in these faster time controls, and yeah, I mean, it requires lots of opening and theoretical knowledge by white players, and usually it's not the way it is. So when they take knight g4, I even remember when I studied these positions, we were just young, and I was just analyzing with a good friend of mine, Ivan Dimitrievich, and we've been analyzing these positions, and at that time we found some crazy position with the knight b3. And actually we came up with this knight b3, and nowadays it's considered to be a refutation of this bishop g4 piece sack. But before we reach the knight b3, let me just show you what happens with the most logical things. I remember a couple of blitz games, long castles, then you take on d4, and boom, you just play bishop h6, and you just win a queen. That happened in 3 tournament games that I found, or actually 5 that I found online in database. A very interesting one, and black wins on the spot. Then, instead of long castle, what happens if they just play the most logical thing? They just want to keep the dark square bishop. First of all, you have to notice that they can't play long castle any longer because of bishop h6, and you go e6. That e6 idea gives us a threat of queen h4 check, and they just have to do h4 themselves. Now, we want to maintain control of the king side by supporting that knight on g4 and fixing the pawn on h4, so we play h5. And here, if they go with knight c6, b takes c6, bishop e2, we just have that queen b8 idea. Since they can't play long castle because of bishop g4, because of bishop h6, since they have problems with, even if they manage somehow to do that long castle afterwards, we want to play like d5, maybe f5. We also have like pressure, and it's always a very annoying thing when you have a pressure with the queen on the b file altogether with the bishop on g7. Yes, black does have a compensation in a game like this. So if they're bishop e2, you just play bishop h6. They go queen d3, you go knight c on e5. Only move for the queen is here, and you play rook c8. If you ask me, with possibilities such as queen a5, in some lines b5, b4, or a6, b5 if you don't want to sack, or if you simply assess that sacking the pawn wouldn't be a good thing. Inability to make long castle. Of course, nobody even thinks of short castle as well. That just gives black a very, very specific type of the game that I'd be gladly going with the black pieces against early g4. So because of that, I just showed you that all these guys who want to play against you, they simply have to go with knight to b3. Knight c6 also doesn't work in bishop d4 because you play e5 or rook b8. Now you kind of close the dark square bishop on this diagonal, but for what? For the sake of activity. Once again, they don't have the long castle because of bishop h6, and once again we just have to say that here playing d5, e4, opening up the bishop, opening up the center, going with some sort of like nice attacking ideas would be very good for us. That's why they have to play knight b3. And if knight b3, you just have to go with this extremely difficult move d5. I've seen some games in the past by some even pretty strong GMs who play d5, and now they have to play the only move it takes d5. If they don't do it, if they play knight d5, you play e6. And they go back, now you have queen h4. They go like this. Now you take, and queen e4 wins the rook. So many nice and easy tricks you have there. Then they have to play some bishop g5, you play f6, two pieces are hanging, you will take one of these. For example, they play knight e3, threatening your knight as well. You take, they take, you go rook f4, threatening on e4, winning there, and playing like this. You know what? We're down a piece, but we have two pawns and a full activity, and they have a kind of weak king in the center. I would be once again gladly black in this position. That's why after d5 they gotta take by pawn. You take on a3, winning the bishop pair. They can't play d takes c6 because of queen b6, and black is just great here. So when they play queen to a3, we just play bishop c3. And once again, they shouldn't play the most logical thing, where they don't break the pawn structure, because you have go with this. They go with the rook, you give check, and you go with the knight before, threatening on c2, rook c8, going after the queen. King is kind of weak there as well. They can't play a long castle because of knight a2. So many threats in this position for black, and that's why they have to take by pawn. Once again, it requires very deep and profound opening knowledge by white players, but let's say they know it, because otherwise they wouldn't be going with the ninth move, very specific g4 pana variation. After rook g1, rook a8, bishop d3, and you play queen h5. This is absolutely the best line for white. Let's be honest, in this position white is better. It's considered to be refutation of this line. Although when we play queen h5 they have problems with the long castle. They anyways have a very broken pawn structure. We don't have the dark square bishop, unfortunately. The dragon bishop has to disappear, but okay, I mean, it's worth of trying, and you can play like a couple of games like this, and just to see if your opponents know how to create bishop g4. So it's very interesting. Although my job as your online YouTube coach should be to explain you and to give you the best line. And after g4, the best line for black is bishop e6. When I teach my students to play dragon, I always tell them, guys, this is the only position in the whole dragon concept where you place your bishop on e6 and give it up for the knight on d4. It's very important to make the difference and to know, aha, this is the only position where we actually play this bishop e6 and give up bishop for the knight. And there is a very obvious reason for something like that. So you just give up bishop for the knight for what? Because when they take it, and that's the main move here, you're just going to have an open f-file, and you're just going to have an attack against the possibly weak pawn on f3. Everything would be different if the pawn was on g2. Then you absolutely have no compensation. They have no weakness on f3. You have two double pawns on e6 and e7, and he's got a bishop pair, and he would be so much better. In position like this, you absolutely have a nice compensation, and this is what I absolutely like about black's game. Although, we just have to discuss something else. After bishop e6, let's first check what happens in like 5% of the games. h4. It happened to me in a couple of games. That move absolutely doesn't seem to be working, because according to old good rule in chess, and according to Nimzovich, who plays on the wing, break in the center. So you just play d5. You're not afraid if they ever take on e6, because you captured, threaten d4. And from another point of view, if they play long castles, queen a5, black is just great. You threaten d4, they have weakness here, you have an open file, you have open c and d files, and everything is looking good for you. Well, on the other hand, if they play just g5, you have this knight h5 threatening knight g3, and after castles, there is a fantastic thing for black here. It goes with bishop takes d4, taking like this and playing knight to g3. Who would say that a game like this should be so much better? But actually everything depends on this move. You're removing the rook and the queen and weakening the bishop on d4, because if they move the rook, you're just going to take on d4. If they move the knight, you're gonna take on d4, and afterwards win a piece or exchange. And just like you see, that's why nobody should be playing h4 against you. Another thing, when they play like instead of h4, is long castle. Long castle is a very similar variation to the ninth move, long castle, knight takes d4. If they play long castle now, we now take on d4, and we urgently go with the queen on a5. I insist, having the queen on a5 with the bishop on e6 is a very strong thing, because we attack the pawn on a2, and at the same time we can do it because the king is not on b1. Why is that so important? I'm going to show you later during this lecture, but the point is, if the king was on b1, they would be able to play knight d5. Here, they can't play knight d5 simply because if they play knight d5, we take on d2 and it's gonna be with check. Imagine that the king was on b1 like this. Then they would have knight e7 check. Here, the king is not there, they gotta take, and in that case, you just take on d5 and you equalize. When you play like this, they have two types of reactions. They have a3, and on a3, all you have to remember is, aha, they played a3, they're not threatening knight d5 yet because the king is still not on b1, so we can play rook b8, b5, and b4. This is way more accurate than also playable move rook f c8, and this is a very strong thing, mainly because of that b5 and b4 advance. Another thing is if they play king b1, then you just go with rook f c8. So what's the difference? With the king on b1, guys, this is alarm for all the dragon players. Queen is on a5, king is on b1, which means they threaten knight d5. So imagine you play stupid rook ac8. I say stupid because this rook should be going to c8. What's wrong with the rook ac8? They play knight d5. Watch this out. They now threaten to take your queen. And now you say, aha, they want to take my queen. So what? I'm going to take. Yes, you do take. But it's not with check, which gives them precious time to do this check. And now you understand why do we need rook from f to c8. Because if this is the case, you would have king f8 to approach the king. And in this case, you can't play king f8 to approach the king and attack this knight. So that's why we play rook fc8. And on top of all that, we're now, like preventing knight d5 by white. But at the same time, we want to go with rook takes c3 followed by queen a2. A very common mistake. Way more common is that I go with h4, not feeling that I didn't play rook fc8 only to defend myself and to prevent knight e5, knight e7, but also I'm threatening some tactics with rook takes c3. So those who after rook fc8 play a move like h4, they absolutely weren't aware of the fact and the threat coped with the rook takes c3. I very much enjoyed this type of trick. That's the point of having the bishop and the queen on a5. So when they take by bishop, you just deliver checkmate, which happened to me zillions of times. And I won my games very easily. And when they play queen c3, you take. And it's just important to remember that they threaten queen a3, that they want to trade the queens off and play by up an exchange. And here you have to remember, first check buddies, and then queen a4. The whole point of having the queen on a4 is that you now want to go with knight takes e4, winning the bishop on d4. So you already have a knight and the pawn for exchange. King on d2 is weak, which is a very important thing to notice. And now we have obvious threats, such as knight takes e4, rook c8, and they have lots of problems in position like this. You can analyze this at home, but just to know black is better. And in case of a3, which is absolutely the main move, you go rook ab8. So when they go h4, now they start shaking like crazy. They start seeing phantoms where they don't exist. Now we play b5 and play b4. I'd like to emphasize the importance of position like this, and I'd like to once again emphasize the importance of having all these pieces standing like this. I just want to break on the queen side with b4, and I'm having an amazing attack. This is a very lovely position. Everything seems to be working perfectly fine for us, and you can analyze these positions for yourself at home. Just to know something, h5 loses on the spot to b4, g5 loses on the spot to b4, and when they play, of course, nobody can take like this because you take on c3 and you're winning, because bishop c3 doesn't work because of rook c3. But if they play knight b5, you don't move the knight, which is also fine, but you play fantastic queen a4 and keep on studying this position at home. G takes, they're up a piece, you play b takes. They say, but I'm up 2 pieces. And then I don't want to show you anything else but rook takes c2. So you're down 2 pieces, you're not even sacrificing a rook, and then you just send them a message. Amen. I was studying Maya's analysis on his YouTube channel. By the way, don't forget, I always have to remind you, if you want to get like much deeper and better analysis, you can just purchase them here on the channel. So after like b5, knight d5, you just go with queen takes d2, rook takes d2, and here I'm just going to give you one more thing before we finish this line. So usually when they see all these problems, and when they, especially in faster time controls, have to solve the tactical problems and such idea code with b4, they usually jump with the knight on d5. They usually say, okay, I see lots of, like dangerous things. Let me just trade the queens off and go into calm waters. But that's not going to bring them anything that special, especially if you know that you should give up bishop for the knight and play a5, and afterwards you will kill the bishop pair by bringing the knight back to d7 and playing b4. Black is absolutely fine. So just like you see, we've seen lots of things here, and we've been analyzing these long castle stuff. I believe the main move is just knight takes e6. It's a very logical thing. I just have to say that taking on e6, they win the bishop pair, they break the pawn structure, but they give us something to hope for. What's that? Open file and possibly weak backward pawn on f3. So what are the ways to play these positions? If they go with straightaway attack against our king, like pawn on e6 by playing bishop c4, you just play queen c8. It's very important to understand. We're gonna chase the light squared bishop away with knight e5, threatening on f3 and the bishop on e2, c4. And when they go back to e2, you'll play knight c4 and win the bishop pair. Or if they go back with the bishop here, you will always kill the light squared bishop by playing knight a5. So if they go long castles, you just get rid of the pin with this. They cannot bring it back to b3 because f3 is hanging. And when they bring it back here, you're just taking it like this. Black is absolutely fine. Now they have clearly weak pawn on f3. And I can go with rook c8, b5, b4, while I'm gonna keep my rook being on the f file and going after the pawn on f3. So bringing the knight back to d7 and even pressuring this knight on c3 all together with the pawn on a2 could also be a great asset for black in these positions. After bishop c4, queen c8, don't forget that's how we solve the problems. Unique way of solving the problem is if the bishop tries to hide itself there, win it like this. If they go long castles or whatever, you play knight e5, threatening both pawn on f3 and bishop on c4 and doing a great thing. And finally, if they go with long castles, then we play knight e5, threatening the pawn on f3. And what's happening here? Point is that they cannot play f4 because they're just going to lose the pawn on g4. So they got to defend it with the bishop. Couple of games I played against guys who played queen g2. Whenever you move your queen away from the queen side, and especially defending the knight, it's an open call for us to go rook c8 and to go for the very typical dragon sacrifice with rook takes c3. So no matter what's happening here, for example, g5, just sack it. Because if they take, you take on e3. They take, you take on f3. Or they take pawn, you go knight h5, and I have queen a5, f3 is hanging, c3 is weak, a2 is weak. In general, king is just terrible there on c1, and everything seems to work perfectly fine. So after bishop e2, we play a crucial move here. And this variation was considered to be absolutely fine for white, till black found the following move. I believe this move was found like 5 or 6 years ago, mainly thanks to the engines. And before that, all these famous dragon players had some problems with the dragon in this position. I remember Nigel Short was playing this with white with great successes. He would even reposition his knight to d4, attack the weakness, and then he would just have a nice position. Well, black absolutely had no attack on the queen side. But then black found a refutation of the of that variation with the queen c8. Who would say that a queen c8 could be the refutation? And what's so special about this queen c8 move? Knight wants to jump on c4. So knight wants to jump on c4, and what's happening? If they go with h4. If they go with king b1, just play knight f2 d7, pressuring on f3, and at some point you'll jump on c4. On your question, can we jump on c4 still? Yes, we can. Why do we play first knight f2 d7? Because we want to provoke them to make some kind of a weaknesses with rook h2 f1, which means they won't have h4, h5 that efficiently anymore, so knight c4 and you're just fine. Or if they play f4, then you play knight c4, and now they have weakness here, here, and we have weaknesses to play against. They play e5, pinning the knight. Okay, buddy, but it's not a big deal. I'm moving my knight to b6, and I'm getting a nice game. You can check like lots of games here. Black is absolutely fine. They can't take because you play rook f to d8. A very lovely continuation as well. And if they take, you just take by rook on d6, and everything seems to be working fantastic for black. And finally, if they play and go for the main move, they just go with h4. h4 is interesting. They want to go with h5. They want to take advantage of the bishop pair and possibly, I don't know, a lag in development by black. But it's only looking at first sight like that. You just go knight f to d7. No, you did not play knight f to d7 to take on f3, especially, okay, you will take it now if they don't play h5. But if they play h5, believe it or not, you don't take on f3. There is one fantastic trick by white coped with the knight d5. You can analyze this at home. I just wanted to show you this fantastic trick and to somehow like raise your awareness that this trick exists and you're not supposed to take here. It's very, how would I say, at first glance, illogical and somehow counterintuitive. You play knight f to d7 to take on f3, and when they play h5, you don't take on f3. But here, as your coach, I just have to emphasize the importance of that, and you probably would remember my words, and you won't make mistake, and you won't go for that. I remember playing against GM Nestorovic in some blitz like 10 years ago. I played knight c4, queen takes c4, h takes, h takes. Majority of my opponents here go with bishop h6. It's mistake, and it loses on the spot. But it's so, like tempting move. You just take on c3 and you take on f3. And when they play queen g5, you play king f7. Don't worry, you're untouchable, you're up a pawn, they can play rook f1, king is absolutely safe on f7, and probably I won 20 games like this. I even beat, I believe he's now a GM, Nikos Veres from the Netherlands, on Play Chess 2013 like this. But then they found a way better idea with f4. That's what Nestorovic played against me. I played bishop c3. They can't take by queen because this would be one side type of an endgame and one goal endgame, because I can only win this type of an endgame, or worst case scenario may draw. They take by pawn, and now we play queen a2. We threaten mate in 1. And now they play queen h2, they threaten mate in 1. And who would say, most of us would say, oh my goodness, I knew this line even further at that time. I played king f7. He came up with check, came here. He gave me, I believe, check on g6. I played king d8 and played d5. When I played rook c8, position objectively is drawn, but he afterwards made mistake and I managed to win. So what's the point of this one with the king e8? When they play e5, you once again take, they go like this, and you play like this. Point is, I'm just here to give you like directions. You're gonna learn, you're gonna check, you're gonna make sure about all these lines and see that they absolutely seem to be working. You know what? It took me like 20, maybe even more minutes to explain you what to do against the g4, so it's time for the long castle. I gave you all the variations. I gave you even bad lines. What shouldn't you do against g4? So I believe it's enough. Let's go for the long castle. First Yugoslav variation, bishop c4. If I made this video like even 3 years ago, bishop c4, Yugoslav variation with the ninth move, bishop c4, would be considered the main line against the dragon. Nowadays, almost everyone go with the ninth move, long castle. No one anymore, not no one, but people rarely play bishop c4. I remember reading opening revolution of 80s book by Gary Kasparov, who said that if white wants to look for some advantage in the dragon, he probably should be looking in this line with the bishop c4 and h4. Well, that's an interesting statement, but 10 or 15 years later, nothing's changed. Actually, it's changed, but in black's favor. Bishop c4 is not anymore that dangerous for black. So when they play Yugoslav variation with the bishop c4, we just go with bishop d7. We want to go with the rook c8. Of course, I'm going to give you my opening choice of variations. There are like lots of other opening choices in lines, but I believe what I give you is based on experience of more than 35 years as a dragon player, and wrote so many articles, books, and analysis, not to mention like having like thousands of lessons about the dragon for black. So after bishop c4, bishop d7, they just want to go with long castle. But here I have to tell you something. You have so many guys who will know about the bishop c4 Yugoslav variation, and somehow they're so afraid of the Chinese dragon with the rook b8. And these guys who are so afraid, I'm going to show you like both mainline rook c8, and I'm going to also show you like the main concepts in the Chinese dragon. And those who want to avoid Chinese dragon, they just go here with early h4 without committing themselves with 10th move long castle. No more Chinese dragon was once considered the most accurate move order. White first opens the h file and plays long castle later when it suits him. And here I have an answer for one game for faster time controls, knight a5. So when they play bishop e3, queen c7, and then after h5 you take by queen and play a game like this, if you ask me, position like this is absolutely playable for black. Okay, I'll be honest with you, there is a line that is extremely dangerous here by white, but I guess nobody won't know it. I played probably 20 games like that, and nobody came up with so-called refutation of the line that I just showed you. So just like I said, for faster time controls, you can shoot this knight a5, queen c7, jump with the knight on c4, capture by queen, and go with rook fc8. Afterwards, you want to go with b5 and b4 with a very lovely game. I know this variation from the game Kirilla against Vladiano, a very strong GM, especially in the dragon, who absolutely knows his stuff and analysis in the dragon for black. So, just like you see, this is a very interesting line. Although, if you want to play classic against h4, all you have to do is just h5. When you commit yourself with h5, now this actually goes into the Yugoslav variation, because when they play long castles, now you can't play rook b8. This is not anymore Chinese dragon, or at least not anymore a good order of moves for black. So you have to go with rook c8 if you want to play those positions, bishop e3 and knight e5, and now it just transposed into one of the main positions of the Yugoslav line. We're about to analyze them, but we're about to analyze them from bishop c4, bishop d7, long castles, and rook c8. Just like I told you, afterwards I'm going to show you what to do even with the Chinese dragon when you play 10th move rook b8, but let's just first take a look at rook c8. First of all, I have to tell you and to show you how I won probably 20 games, maybe even more, when people forget here and play g4, h4, king b1, they lose on the spot. You just take on d4, they forget an importance of the rook and attacking the bishop. They can't take by bishop because bishop is dying, so when they take by queen, we're using famous stretching. You're stretching the queen between both bishop on c4 and bishop on e3. Since queen cannot defend both pieces at the same time, you're gonna take one of the bishops and you're gonna win the game. So if they go queen d3, you take on e3, take on c4, and you're winning. After like rook c8, they have to go with the bishop e3. When they go with bishop e3, I'm going to show you two things here. If you don't feel like remembering all these variations, you can just go with knight a5, eliminate the light square bishop, and stop the attack with h5. There is no more attack for you, typical dragon counter attack on the queen side, and this is not my cup of tea, but I just want to give you that as a possibility as well. Another thing is, if you want to play like Topalov, ex-world champion Vasilin Topalov played knight takes d4, bishop d4, and b5. I explained it to a couple of my students. It's very interesting. They had very decent results with this knight takes d4 and b5 approach. Usually in these positions, there are zillions of moves for white, but they usually go with the knight d5. That's considered to be the best. You take, they take, and when they take by pawn, you just chase the bishop away, sack the pawn like this, go on g8 to avoid some checks, and then just get yourself ready for some attacks on the queen side. If you want to play this, just take a look at these variations. They're still possible and interesting for playing. And finally, I'm going to show you the ideas with knight e5. Knight e5, one of the most interesting type of positions there, and I won't go too deep in these variations, because if we go too deep in these variations, we won't be able to end up this lecture within 10 hours. So after knight e5, I'm just going to show you the basic tricks. I remember when I played this, and I played like probably 10 times in tournament games, 2 games I won against g4, and I'm going to immediately list out their names. One was international master Bošković, 2450 FIDE, pretty strong player, but he misplayed the other moves. We were both young at the time, and he played g4, I played b5, and the point is that they can never play g5 because of b4. That's how we played. He played knight c2, I played knight h5, he played knight g3, and the most important and crucial thing here is not to take on g3, because they will play h6, g3, and queen h2, but to play a5, and when they take, not to be afraid of this pawn structure, because you always have, even knight c4 would be okay, but a4 absolutely breaks them, and you're just so much better in a position like this. I already played 2 games like this. Then another game, I played against a guy, Djukic, who's an FM, played against me knight e5, I captured, played e6, started chasing away the bishop, and won the game as well. So just like you see, g4 is a typical mistake in practice that a lot of people made against me. In Blitz, I had a couple of times players who went for queen e2 to prevent knight c4. Just like I previously told you, moving the queen away from defending knight on c3 would be very bad. Then you immediately unleash rook takes c3, followed by queen a5. It's one of the most typical ideas, so it's a typical exchange sacrifice in the dragon, and one of the most typical things in these type of positions, where you just go with this and crush them afterwards with rook c8. So they play king b2, rook c8, bishop d2, and you play b5. Just like you see, you're down in exchange, but believe it or not, it's hardly playable from white's point of view. I'm just going to do one trick that I like to do. I always tell my students, imagine playing a game like this with white pieces. You wouldn't feel comfortable, especially because c4 could be faced with queen b6, and game is just good for you. Then I had so many games against guys with bishop h6. I even played against international master Sredovic from Serbia. He played bishop h6. It was, once again, we were younger. It was Serbian championship under 18. I captured, and once again, I drove the queen away from the defense of the knight on c3. I went for rook takes c3, so kind of launched the attack. And then I played queen a5 in that game, and followed by rook c8, which is possible, but you can also go with a5, what Korchnoi played against Geller in Candidates 9071. You want to go with a4 to win this piece. When they play for themselves, queen c7 to go queen c5, queen c5 to go with queen a4, queen a3 check, and after king b2, you just have bishop a4 because you threaten knight c4, typical dragon idea. Well, in case of king d2, you just play bishop a4 again. Or in case of h4, you just sack a piece. They can't take by knight because queen is hanging. So when they take like this, you just go with this, take by bishop, and this happened in game Petrenko Melo in Bucharest 2000. So just like you see so many different kinds of reactions by white absolutely fall down the water. I'm going to list them out again. On g4, you play b5 and you're immediately great because on g5 you play b4. On bishop h6, you just take and second c3. On queen e2, they leave protection of the knight on c3 and you sack exchange followed by queen a5. Any knight d5, which I faced once in my practice, you just take. If they take by bishop, you just chase it away and then you just play a5. Typical way of chasing the light square bishop away and winning the game. And if they take by pawn, once again, typical way of chasing it away, jumping with the knight, and this was my game. The guy played c3, I played queen a8, threatening the pawn. He played knight e2, and I played a crucial thing here. I played this game in Bulgaria 2010. I played this to open the dark square bishop. If he takes, I'll play bishop c takes. I'll play bishop f5 and rook c2 with a very lovely mating threats. He played a takes before, I played a3, and I managed to open up the game and to destroy him after rook b4, a2, and bishop f5, stretching his queen and doing these fantastic bishops once again. So we've seen 4 moves: bishop h6, g4, queen e2, and knight d5. And we just realized that there is a big probability that your opponent, if he doesn't know the theory, may fall for these ones. There is one more suspicious move in these lines. It's a normal rook h3-1. Lots of guys like to play this normal rook h3-1 move, hoping for some bishop g5, bishop f6, and going with f4 a5, going after the bishop on d7. When that happens, you play knight c4, winning the bishop pair, playing typical dragon idea, and they play king b1. And now queen a5 doesn't work because of famous knight d5, queen d2, knight d7 trick, but Tivyakov went for a very lovely idea, queen b8. It supports b5 and b4 with a pawn storm on the queen side, and also gives you rook fc8, aligning up these rooks on the c file and going with all these typical ideas. After g4, b5, g5, b4, knight e2, knight h5, Tivyakov had rook fc8 in his game against Yanev, 1989. You want to go a5, a4, b3, or a3, depending on circumstances on the board. With the bishop pair, without a possibility for white to attack, with some sort of, let's just say, ambition of white to play in the center, but he simply failed to do it, black was so much better. So just like you see, we've seen rook h3-1, which is bad. We've seen bishop h6, which is bad. g4, which is bad. Queen e2 as well, and knight d5. Time for the serious lines. I'd begin this story with the bishop g5. Bishop g5 is a very annoying type of move. Usually, I used to teach some of my students to play this bishop g5 idea. It's aimed against early knight c4. So I'm showing you the point of bishop g5 and why could it be interesting attempt by white. Because if you take it for granted and say, okay, the typical idea in the dragon is just play knight e5, knight c4, they take it and break with e5. So when you take it, they play hyper positional. Look at this. Now you see the point of bishop g5. They want to take on f6 and win the bishop on d7. You don't have time for rook f7 because they take on f6, and whether you take by bishop or pawn, they just play knight b5. Very lovely game, and turns out to be good enough for white in practice. You're up in exchange and you should be winning. Interesting enough, after bishop g5, since we know that they want to go with some type of ideas, we just have to go for something that should be useful for us and not to give them this typical idea. It's rook e8. So what is it all about? The point is, if they now go with f4, knight c4, bishop c4, and e5, we won't take it and risk losing the piece, but play knight h5. Now, they can't take on d6 because the knight on d4 is hanging. Well, at the same time, if they play queen d3, I can move my queen and my pawn is not hanging since it's defended by the rook on e8. Many times, in many occasions, we'll find this rook on e8 being one of the most important moves in the dragon. It first of all defends that pawn on e7 in many circumstances. On any bishop h6 gives you retreating bishop h8 without having the rook on f8. In many occasions it gives you queen a5 and they won't have knight d5, knight e7 with check, and so many other things. That's the point of rook e8 and you're absolutely fine. And now let's go to two most critical variations. Lately, in the last 10 years, I just did a stats before I made this video. I realized that 75% of the games went with move that was considered to be one of the most critical one. It's by far absolutely the most common line online in Blitz, Rapid, and even over the board games. Virtually everyone plays this by white. And I guess there are some books and analysis to show that white is not better but winning in these variations. Although the truth is different in my opinion. After king b1, you have three moves. You have one that I used in a couple of my games and that is very surprising, a5. It's old move by Velimirovic. He used it against Gausner. This guy played normal h4. Velimirovic sacrificed an exchange and played b5. As a dragon player, I very much like this idea. He wants to hide his queen on a8, play rook c8, go after the queen, and kill the white with a game like this. In the game was a3, Velimirovic played queen a8, played rook c8, and absolutely had a lovely dragon game. On a5, refutation, or the best move, should be a4. I played it once. I was white against a good friend of mine who unfortunately passed away, Antorumush. He played knight c4, bishop c4, rook c4, b3, and he played rook b4. And somehow, in these positions, he managed to come up with some sort of action with some b5, queen a8, a4. We eventually made the draw, but he was very dangerous as an attacker, and this position looks very interesting for black, even though engines prefer it for white. So that's a one line. Then I used to teach my silver and bronze world medalist, international master Richard Wang, to play a6 followed by b5. Richie won this so many times. I even beat woman GM Eva Videnova with a6. The point is, after h4, h5, and when they play g4 you take, h5, knight h5, and when they play rook dg1 you play queen a5. There are so many analyses. I even played against Vasquez Schroeder on chess.com in 2017 like this. I won so many games with it. My big friend from Croatia, one of the biggest dragon experts, Darko Feletar, played a game like this against Zoran Jovanovic, and he managed to win that game in this variation as well. So just like you see, all these variations turn out to be good. That idea with a6 will give you b5 at some point. In some of these lines you don't want to sack that pawn on b5, not to give that pawn without any reasons, and that's how you play it. So because of that, we just have to know that a6 is another possibility. Third possibility that I like to give you here, and it was given in David Vigorito's book, it's knight c4. It's the most natural one. So after knight c4, rook c4, g4, white has tremendous score from this position, and advancing the g pawn first means that black has to be concerned with not only typical h4, h5 plans, but g5 as well. Although after b5, b3 was refutation. I remember I was playing the European under 18 or 20 championship in Greece. I was white. I beat up a Greek player with the b3. The guy put the rook here, and I remember I made a bet with a good friend of mine, Felfi, or I am Feletar from Croatia. I said, I know that the guy is gonna go with this variation with the black pieces. Simply, that's the way I feel it. And he said, no way. We just put some odds and made a bet, and believe it or not, the guy went with rook c5. I played 96. I was white, and I won the game. Then Vigorito made a great analysis in his book about the dragon, and he came up with this b4. It's a key for key exchange sacrifice. Also, this is Golubev's idea, and it's absolutely best practical chance in this position. Black sacrifices not only exchange, but also a pawn. So in positions after b takes, queen c7, black has sacrificed a significant amount of material, pawn and exchange, and in return all his pieces are active. We want to play rook b8 or rook c8. We want to bring the bishop back to e8 and play knight d7 followed by knight d5 or knight b6, knight c4 or a4. I virtually played more than 50 games like this with very good score. But nowadays, you can find this in Vigorito's analysis and book, and it's an interesting possibility. A good friend of mine, Adam Bremner from Scotland, even told me that his friend found that b4 crucial sacrifice idea, but it's considered to be Golubev's, Grandmaster Golubev's gambit. And finally, after king b1, nowadays I enjoy rook e8 the most. Once again, that famous rook e8 trick with defending the pawn on e7 as a potential weakness, giving yourself queen a5 as a possibility, no more knight e5, knight e7. Any bishop h6 could be met with bishop h8. In some of circumstances, when they play bishop f6, knight d5, and the queen is away, you can bring the bishop back to g7, and e7 is not going to be hanging. Also, it's a nice, useful move. Any g4 you face with b5 and g5, b4. Any instead of h4, any bishop h6, you always take and sack on c3 followed by a5. Ivanchuk's game, and Tivyakov hockey in Arab Championship 2004. But basically, they have to go with h4. They simply have to go with it. And remember, when Carlsen played rook e8, he was studying with Kasparov these dragon positions, and then came up with this. So h5, g4, h takes, h5, knight h5, bishop h6, and all you have to remember about these positions is to go with a move such as king h7. King h7 is a crucial thing here. After bishop g7, king g7, all you want to do is bring in the rook on h8, and you're just defending everything in time. I played so many times against the guys who thought that rook h5, g takes h5, and queen g5 can give them something. Of course, it can give them if we don't play knight g6. If we play like king h7, they usually see check, this check, and you once again have to go knight g6, otherwise this is mate. There are so many nice dragon tricks like this, but when you play knight g6 and they simply play knight f5, you take, and looks like they're about to win the knight. Although you play e6, threatening to trade the queens off. When they take, you take by this knight, and when they play like this, you take like this. And you know what? Yes, they do have like two pieces, but we have like 3 pawns and rook for 2 pieces. Also, we have 4 connected pawns. I probably played 20 games in Blitz like this and won all of them, because it's, you don't have to be Magnus Carlsen, just push these pawns and promote to the queen. I showed you everything about the king b1, so it's time for the crucial h4 and h5 lines. I'm going to try to cut these things as much as possible. Straight away thing with g4, h5, and bishop h6 doesn't seem to be working. And it doesn't seem to be working because of famous refutation related with king h7. So when they take, you absolutely use the same kind of a thing. Rook h5, queen g5, knight f5, knight f5, bishop f5, e takes, and e6. They exchange, you take, they take, you take, and you easily win the following middle game or end game. Then I remember someone tried bishop g5, keeping like these bishops on the board, but it doesn't seem to be working as well. If bishop g5 happens here, you just go rook takes c3. It's known from the game of 2 of my ex-students, Todorovic against Mladenovic. Mladenovic came up with race rook takes c3, And if queen c3, then he's got knight f3. And if b takes c3, he takes on f3, brings his bishop on g4, and he just wins the game. A very easy game, a very nice system, and black seems to be completely winning with idea like this. g4 doesn't work. It's refuted. It used to be popular like 50 years ago, but not anymore. Rook dg1. There is a guy from my city, an FM, Radoja, who constantly keeps playing this rook dg1 followed by g4. Although probably by reading his books like 40 years ago, he learned this trick, and at that time it worked. Not anymore. You just go with queen a5. And in those games, when he tried g4, you take, and when he plays h5, you just sack on c3. There is one older correspondence games where you go with this. B takes c3, you take on f3. Don't forget, you're down on exchange. Now you're down a rook, because you don't want to take on f3, you would be lost, but you take on e4. You first give check, you take on c3, and play bishop f5. After they play like this, you go with this, and you got to remember queen a6. Funnily enough, I had 3 games like this, and I won 3 of games like this. It's important to remember that you threaten mate, they got to go rook h2 to defend, and they all think that the g takes f3 doesn't work. Crucial thing is that in defensive resources by the queen on a6. So when they play queen f5, you take, they play h6, and now you go with queen e6. Such a difficult move. They take, and looks like they cannot avoid mate. Actually, black cannot avoid mate. We give check, we give check, we give check, we take here, and unfortunately for these guys, they are short for one move, and we're winning. Both of these moves. So g4, we just take it, and play king h7. And rook dg1, you just go with queen a5 with the ideas of taking first on g4 and then doing the typical exchange sack on c3. And now it's time for other variations. Early bishop h6 is also suspicious because of typical. We take, sack, and play queen a5. It is especially important to give you one thing here. To remember that any rook sack followed by queen a5 especially works when the king is on c1. And it works because, let's imagine they go g4, for example, or f4 here. You play queen c3. And when they take, you first give check, then you take with check, then you take with check, and then you play knight e4 followed by queen c3. And I played 2 games like this. When they play king e4, bishop f5, check. It's checkmate. I won 2 blitz games like this. Or if rook to d3, check, check. And after bishop, if king f4, queen e5 is check. If bishop d5, you take, play queen c6. You're down a rook, but believe it or not, they can't avoid e6, and you're winning. Okay, you can analyze lots of things like this at home, but my job here is just to give you the ideas. They play king b1. King b1 is aimed against queen c3, and it's a clever move, because if you play queen c3, which is very tempting, they bring the knight back with tempo and play knight f4. Now they threaten knight g6, and you're worse. Because if e6, they just go knight d3, and you have problems with the pawn on d6, and you're down in exchange. That's why after king b1, you gotta know for b5. So now you want to play knight c4, queen a3, rook b8 stuff, and you also want to take on c3. When they play knight e2, you bring the queen on a3. That's a fantastic idea. You want to play knight c4, you want to play and bring your pawn a5, a4, chasing the light square bishop away, and position just looks great. When they go knight f4, you play knight c4. That's the point of b5. So now, if they take, they're going to get mated because they won't be able to avoid rook b8 with checkmate. So the thing is, after knight c4, they got to bring it back here. We play rook c8. And just like you see, we have a very lovely type of the game. Even though we're down in exchange, they absolutely ran out of attacking ideas. And now we have everything to hope for here. We've seen g4, we've seen bishop h6 and rook dg1. It's time in these positions to check 2 main moves. Let's just see positional rook h1. I'm never afraid of this rook h1. Then we just go with a classic knight c4, bishop c4, bishop c7, and when they want to take and play knight d5, watch out this idea, bishop f6 followed by knight d5, you play bishop e6, so now they won't be able to play like this, because any knight d5 you will face with the bishop takes d5. So they go king b1, you play rook c8, tripling our pieces, and they can hardly stop a5, a4, b5, b4. We have the bishop pair, we have attack, they do not have anything, so rook h3-1 is another, I would say, a lame, positional, very slow approach by white. And now, time to check two main lines. King b1, where you once again play knight c4 and take on c4, and it's known that after knight d2 they want to overprotect on c3, avoid knight e4 once they play bishop h6, because in case they play bishop h6 we always have knight e4. So that's why, oh okay, here we can even take on d4. So that's why they first move the knight back to e2, getting these flexible knights, over supporting on a c3, defending on d4, preparing for bishop h6. Here you just go with b5, and when they go with bishop h6, Kasparov played against Anand in World Championship match in New York 1994, queen a5. Of course you can play b4, bishop g7, rook fc8, and you remember he won that game because Anand made a terrible blunder, but let me just show you the game. And the game was knight e5, Kasparov captured, played knight e5, played this mysterious rook b8 move, rook c5, rook fc8, played a5, and position was objectively speaking equal. And here Vishy and Anand all of a sudden played b4. Kasparov played rook c4. Vishy absolutely blundered something incredible. Kasparov came up with check. Vishy came up with king a3. Thought that Kasparov made a blunder, but then he was absolutely shocked when Kasparov came up with rook c2, rook sack, and if rook c2, rook b3, rook e3, and Anand resigned. So that king b1 should be faced with the knight c4, where we're following the game Anand Kasparov. And finally, if they play the main move bishop g5, I'm going to give you one of the most beautiful dragon moves characteristic for the Yugoslav line. It's the rook c5 move, and I always ask my students, guys, give me at least 4, but there are like 5 or 6 reasons why we play rook c5. I'm gonna explain you. First of all, in some circumstances, this rook supports the b5 idea. Secondly, it gives you queen a5, where any knight d5, queen on a5 wouldn't be hanging, because it's gonna be defended by the rook on c5. Thirdly, in some positions when they jump with the knight on d5, for example, there are positions when they, for example, sometimes take and play knight d5, you can even consider sacking an exchange with a rook d5. Then, in some other positions, this rook can always be sacked for the dark square bishop, which is absolutely lovely type of compensation for black. You know, like the fifth idea could be rook on c5. Afterwards, whether we move queens on c7 or queen on a5 can be doubled up with a rook fc8, and you would have like a very dangerous rooks on the c file. Just like you see, rook c5 is one of those crucial ideas. There are so many ideas here. I don't want to show you now everything. I'm just going to show you the main line. I'm just going to show like one move. On g4, you take, and if they play h5, you take. You always take both of these pawns. Knight d5. This is my game from Bulgaria, Bansko, 2010 against an FM. I sacked an exchange and played queen b6, threatening knight f3. This is my game against Rb8 Perunovic, Bansko, 2010. Then, if they play, instead of this direct approach, rook d on g1, we play queen a5. If previously queen a5 was working, it even works now. We once again, after g4, first take the pawn, and now after h5 we second exchange. We're once again winning. Then they can go with knight d on e2. Looks like they're over supporting the knight on c3, avoiding all these kinds of threats, and threaten f4 followed by e5. Anthony Miles, famous English GM, played b5, played knight c4, and when the guy played e5, brought the bishop back. After he takes d6, played bishop g4. This is a typical way of exploiting the bishop pair. You don't care, since you're down a pawn, maybe even 2 pawns down. You just have a fantastic compensation, initiative, and of course Anthony Miles won in 26 moves. Then Queen E2. Of course, we always second here and play Rook C8, Rook C3, Queen A5, Rook C8. Mihail Marin won against Bjerring in 1996. Then if F4, it's a very interesting idea, and Anand also used it once and won when he was younger, but it's bad. Knight C4, Queen D3. You just play Knight G4. You sack that knight for threatening Knight F2 fork. So after they take it, you play Knight F2, Queen E2, you take on H1, and when they go back, you play Bishop G4. I remember finding this line in Opening Revolution of 80s, Garry Kasparov's book, Rook takes C3, Queen A5, and after this, Kasparov said that in the best scenario, White can find maybe some draw, but nobody would play and would be happy to play this with white pieces. Yes, we're down a piece, but we have so many threats, such as A5, A4, such as Queen A1, Rook C8. Those two bishops are also dangerous, and the king on C1 really stands weak. And finally, if in this situation, instead of F4, they just go with Rook H2 E1, we usually jump and then Rook H2 E1 on C4, but we also can play B5 followed by A5, F4, you just play Knight C4, capture by Rook, and on E5, you just play B4. I played a couple of games like this when I was younger. The point was that when they take on F6, they threaten on E7, we take on C3, and when they play Queen to D3, they all put hopes. Bishop is hanging, pawn is hanging, Rook is hanging. Point is that you first take on D4, then you take on F6, then you take on G5, and position like this, I played twice against Grandmaster Pikula from Serbia, and I played against one more guy. I won both of these games in Blitz. Those were online games, but somehow, objectively speaking, should be drawn. I showed you everything, and this is really tiring. So many lines. Main move and main position is in King B1, placing and putting the king in safety. Then you just go with the Rook E8, and I told you, if you don't know what to do, just play Rook E8. It's one of those very, very useful moves where you just defend it and do lots of things, and it can be just useful in so many other deviations. After like Rook H2 E1, this is just one line. I believe that Rajabov against Carlsen played like H5, Rook H5, G takes, and Queen H2. That line was considered to be the refutation of this line. And the thing here is Knight G6, you're threatening the bishop. When they play Queen H5, you just go with Queen A5, threatening the bishop and the queen. And when they play Knight D5, you will see this E6, and they will have all these pieces hanging. I know it looks so dangerous, but don't worry, you have no problems at all. And if they play F4, you can easily sack. It's one of those positions where you sack an exchange, and where you have okay, you actually sack an exchange back, and you're currently up a pawn, and they don't have Knight F5 because of G takes, Queen G6, and Bishop E6. I found a game like this between Rajabov and Carlsen, FIDE Grand Prix 2008. Magnus won fairly easy game with the black pieces. Very interesting one, and I just showed you even Carlsen, who used the dragon in so many of his games. After Rook H2 E1, Queen C8 is my suggestion. Kasparov played against Anand in New York 1995. Queen A5. It wasn't as good as the Queen C8. Bishop H6. Then you can just take on H6 and take on C3. And after you play Queen C3, once again you have an amazing compensation. This happened in Beijing 2013 between Grishchuk and Gary. They, I apologize, they made the draw. Guys, I absolutely showed you everything with the Rook C8. It's time to show you what happens if they play early Bishop C4 and you don't want to play like this, but you want to play Rook B8. Since I explained you in details Rook C8, I don't want to go too deep with the Rook B8. I'm just going to explain you. There is literally only one move for white in this position. It's Bishop to B3. Anything else, like King B1, you just go with knight d4 and b5. You're absolutely fine, and then you just launch the queenside attack by pushing these pawns. If they go, instead of king b1 and knight d4 b5, if they go h4, you just sack the pawn. And if they go with knight d5, you go knight e5, threatening the bishop. So when they cannot go anywhere else but bishop e2 to keep an eye on the knight on b5, you play queen a5, rook c8, and you sack on b3. Same thing, absolutely the same thing, can happen in the line if after a long castles, rook b8, they don't play bishop b3, but they play g4. You absolutely do the same, b5, and when they play knight b5, you play knight e5, and when they go back, you play bishop b5, knight b5, queen a5, rook f8, and this is how you crush them. But you also can play in this position even immediate queen a5. No matter what's happening, they absolutely, against the Chinese dragon, have to play only one move. It's bishop to b3. Bishop to b3, and then you go that knight a5. I played a game a5 myself against Grandmaster Brenya, rejected the draw offer and lost afterwards, but knight a5 is the crucial move. So when they play like bishop h6, you exchange, play e5, and sack that pawn on d6 with b5. Once again, I'm giving you the best ideas for black. Once again, I'm telling you what to do. Don't worry, d6 is not hanging because you play b4, and when they play knight a4, the best scenario for them is this, preventing knight c5 and threatening the rook, going with queen e8 and threatening the knight so it cannot jump on c5 anymore, taking on a4, and when they play knight f5, you gotta take, they come up with this check, and they keep perpetual check, and they win a game like this. So that's the way it is, and that's how we play those positions. So this is the thing. I just gave you the main ideas and directions about the Chinese dragon. Nowadays it's considered to be equally good as rook c8 10th move. Some players even prefer the Chinese dragon. They even believe that black has better chances in the Chinese dragon. If they play king b1, g4, h4 here, you just play b5, and any king b1 you just play like this, and you just go with rook e8, queen a5, and doubling these rooks and playing lots of stuff like this. But that's not the subject of this lecture, because I just gave you the ideas, and you're gonna decide whether you want to play that or not. And finally, long castles. Against long castles, we have so many moves. I want to show you the following ones. The most classic one and the most typical one with d5, I am not going to analyze. It's a classic one. It's a little bit better for white. It's nothing special for white, but nothing special for black either. It doesn't give you an interesting game, but yes, if you want to somehow play to equalize the game, play d5. Then I gotta show you a line that became very popular lately. It's h5. Abdusattorov beat Alexandra Kostenyuk. It's aimed against these typical ideas by white on the king side. And when they go with the king b1, you just go d5. That's the main idea of h5. By playing that move, you're avoiding all these typical type of pawn storms on the king side, and you just want to break with d5. It's a very interesting one. If they play bishop c4, you play bishop d7, and it's kind of almost Yugoslav variation, where they sooner or later, if they play h4, they go into the main lines. If they don't play h4, then at least we're not afraid of any attack by white on the king side. If they play king b1, you play d5, and when they play e takes, knight c6, b takes c6, any knight d5, you just go with the queen c7, and you don't worry about this because of bishop f5. Well, in the case of knight e4, you just play bishop f5, and you just have a very lovely game. In case of knight c6, b takes c6, e5, knight e7, f4, I'm just suggesting you to play e6 and to go rook b8, queen a5, or queen e7, and break at some point with f6. For example, if knight f4 they play positionally, I would just play like this, and I believe that black has position with mutual chances. But I don't want to show you too many things about h5. It's just an interesting possibility. Bishop d7 was one of my most interesting variations. If you want to find a little bit more about bishop d7, I'm not going to tell you anything about this one. Just find the video on my channel, how I won so many games with the bishop d7 for all these years. And then finally somebody just surprised me in my tournament game, learned a refutation. The guy was rated 2200. I barely managed to draw, and I said I won't play like this because they're just going to learn the best line according to the engine, and then it's difficult for playing. Nowadays, when somebody plays long castles, I play line that is considered to be refuted, but I really enjoy it so much and I win most of my games. It's knight e4, bishop d4, and bishop e6. Whoever plays h4, whoever plays g4, he's wasting time. They gotta go with the king b1. King b1 is a special move, and it's aimed against queen a5 by black. If they go with move like h4, you just go queen a5, and then you threaten the pawn. They don't have knight e5 because when you take on d5, d2, you do it with check, and you have a nice game. Also, if they play h4, queen a5, h4 is mistake. You just have rook fc8, not only fighting against knight e5, but also threatening rook takes c3 followed by queen a2. A very similar concepts appear like the ones we've seen already. Same thing we can apply if they play g4. We play queen a5, king b1, and rook fc8. What's the point? If they don't play a3, if they play a3, we just play rook a b8 and play b5 and b4. Lovely game for black with a simple chess. But if they play, for example, h4, if they play h4, guys, if they play h4, just sack an exchange. They cannot take by bishop because it's mate. And when they take by queen, you give check. You play first check and go with a queen on a4. Such an important accuracy for these positions. You're just doing great, and black's position is better. Yes. So they just have to go with king b1. I played a game not while ago against Russian IM. He went for 95 against me. It was rapid game. I played a very suspicious move here. I played bishop d5 and queen c7, and I managed to win that game somehow. But the point is, after 95, you should be going with the rook c8. That's the point, and that's what scores really well. Point is that they should never give up a bishop, because we just want to play with the bishop here and open up the game with f5. They should never take by knight, because we take by a bishop, by pawn, and when they play h4, queen c7, and when they play like this, now you go with this, and no one can stop the d5 because they had problems with the c2 pawn. And that actually means that when we play rook c8, if they make just a move, we play bishop d5, queen c7, and now we threaten, very nice threat, bishop h6, threatening mate or winning the queen. They gotta go with c3. Well, on h4, we just win the knight pawn on d5, bishop g7. That's what happened in my game. My opponent played rook h2, and I went d6, and on h5, queen c5, h takes. Believe it or not, this is perpetual check. But he made a mistake afterwards, and I won the game. So after c3, I played queen a5. We should be actually going for queen a5, threatening both. g5, knight h5, taking, and knight takes g7. So when they play king b1, looks like they saved and defended just everything. You play e5, d takes and f takes. Now, yes, we do have problems with the pawns on d6 and knight on g7, but they also have problems with the pawns on g5 and f3 as well. According to the engines, this position is considered to be drawn or equal, and it's very important to know that. By the way, queen d6, you play rook f to d8, so they can't take it. Bishop h3, you just take the pawn, defend yourself, and you're absolutely fine. We've seen everything. Time to check the main line. The main line goes with king b1. And watch this out. Once again, alarm for you. If they play king b1, you can't play queen a5. Simply, queen a5 loses to knight d5. they threaten the queen, they threaten the pawn on e7. You haven't played rook fc8 in time, which means if you take on d2, they will first include check and they'll be up a pawn and they should be winning. Because of that, we don't play queen a5, but we play queen c7. Idea is to bring the rook to c8 so we can play queen a5 afterwards. So after like h4, we play rook fc8, and only good players know that they should be going with h5. If they go with g4, you just go with queen a5, you threaten rook c3. When they go with a3, you go rook b8. That's what you have to remember, and your position is good. I remember that at some point they just showed me about some queen g5. This position and this type of queenless middle game is equalish. They just take and you take. That's an equal thing. While at the same point, if you want to push for a win, I definitely prefer b5 and afterwards going some h6 followed by b4 and doing the attack. So that's what I prefer much more. That's why they have to go with h4 and h5. You play queen a5. Now you just want to take by rook on c3 and take afterwards on a2. They have to take on g6 first. You play h take g6. And here they have to go a3. Once again, an empty move such as bishop d3, boom, you take here and you take on a2 and check and then queen a4. Once again, they go g4, rook takes c3, queen a2, king c1. I'll repeat it for a couple of times, the same things over and over so you can remember the best idea, and that queen a4 just wins, not wins the game, but you're just having like a much better game because you threaten rook c8, knight e4, and they have problems with all these pieces. That's why they have to go a3. You go rook a b8, launching the queenside attack with b5 and b4. When they play bishop to d3, you go b5. And now I showed you this. I won all my games. I played 12 games and I made 12 wins. No matter who were my opponents, GMs, IMs, FMs. And then there were some smart asses who said, hey, Maya, this is lost. Why do you play this? I'm showing you this following trick with a rook c5, bishop c5, b4. If you want to play like this in your games for fun, because I played 12 games, and believe me, when you play GMs, IMs, FMs, and they don't know the refutation, it's really something. Because when they take, you just sack the rook. And when they go like king b2, bishop c3, and queen a1 mate, or if they play e takes d5, rook b2, king c1, queen c3, for example, and when they take like d takes c6, you just have this rook b1 followed by queen a1 mate. And just like I told you, these guys were so smart and said bishop e3 is winning. Of course bishop e3 is winning. But even here you have some ideas such as bishop f5 and so on, so you can analyze and have fun with it. I'm just here to give you ideas. And once again, if my stats is 100% with this suspicious move, you can always play that. If you ask me, what should you play? And to be normal, it's queen c7. So when they play e5, you take, you play queen c5, so they can't take the rook because we're pinning both of these pieces. They go f4, defending the queen and threatening the rook. And now you gotta go with b4. They take, you play queen b6, avoiding the queen exchange. Now we're just attacking the knight and the bishop. They just have to go with this. You take rook b8 and they go b5. If you ask me, yes, we're worse. But we do have something to hope for. The dark square bishop, and they do not have it. The attack, and they do not have it. Bishop pair, and they do not have it. Problem is pawn on b5, so we gotta do something to organize the attack, but I'm just telling you, this is an interesting line. But by the way, once again, keep in mind my words. If you wanna play something reliable against long castles, you learn the d5, or you learn and check the h5. If you want to have fun, go on my channel and find bishop d7. If you want to have fun, go and play knight takes d4. Hopefully, I just made the things clear, and hopefully you like this step-by-step lecture about the main lines of the dragon, and that this is going to help you and to give you so many wins in the future. It's not easy to make this video, to cover all these lines within one video, and I just tried to somehow, you know, like put it in and somehow to squeeze it in. Many times you will find something that I missed, but in most of these lines, I just try to give you good directions so to know what should you analyze and how should you prepare for your games. Enjoy and good luck with your dragon. Bye bye, guys.